Okay, so we were talking about how communicating effectively means speaking to the level of your audience. And it reminded me of the story that my dad told me a long time ago, and it's been repeated a lot of times when I was growing up. But it starts with when you're in kindergarten and someone asks you to tell them about circles. You know a few things. You know it's a shape. You know that it isn't a square. It doesn't really have sides to you yet. It doesn't have any corners. You know that much. And if someone asked you to draw a circle, you maybe freehand draw something that looks like an oval. Well, you know it's a head or something like that. And then maybe 5 years later, 6 years later, in 6th grade, somebody asks you, tell me about a circle. And maybe you know a little bit more. You know that you can, grab a cup or a bowl and trace around it to draw a circle. You know that maybe the diameter and pi relationship, so pi d is the circumference of the circle. Maybe you know pi r squared. I don't know roughly the age. You go a few years later and you might know that you can put a tack down with a piece of string and you can draw a circle on the paper without actually tracing anything, so you're creating a circle. And you might know that there's an equation to explain a circle, which would be x minus the center point in the x coordinate, the whole thing squared, plus y minus the center point of the coordinate in the y direction, the whole thing squared, equals your radius squared. And that's Pythagoras' theorem. You're basically saying that the radius is the hypotenuse, and you're drawing a bunch of little triangles to make this circle. And that's, 8th grade when you're taking geometry. Then maybe a few years later, you're taking another math class, if you got that far and continued taking math, and somebody asks you to tell them about a circle, and you tell them all of these things, and you can also tell them that a circle could be just considered a plane of a sphere, right? So there's more complex math that can describe it. So you start describing a sphere and saying you're only interested in one plane. Or, if you get even further in math, you might explain how a circle actually describes an infinite line, where, and this is where the math stops for me, that I can sort of get through this explanation and then I'm at a loss. But when you get to a very high level, every point on a circle, if you imagine a circle above a perfectly flat and infinite line. So there's a circle here and there's a line. Every point on that circle, if you take one point above the circle and you draw a line between that point and the circle at that point, will touch that infinite line at a point. Does that make sense? So for example, if you have your point here and you're touching the side of the circle, you're going to go out to an infinite distance. And that is, in essence, describes every single possible point along a line. And you can do the same thing, and then you extrapolate. A sphere describes a plane, etc. But essentially, there's an infinite amount to know about any subject. And being able to speak effectively to your audience, you can't really talk about this idea of a sphere defining a plane to somebody who doesn't know what a circle is. That's all. Just an interesting way to look at how you can communicate with people effectively.